We now have a new challenge, perhaps the most monumental in recorded history. The opportunity to investigate a phenomenon that could change our destiny. A look at ourselves 1,000 years in the future.
We're going to examine and perhaps question some widely held theories of what may have happened to this Earth alive. We're going to investigate some strange and bizarre events in the present, unbelievable happenings as fresh as today's headlines. And more important, perhaps, we're going to take a searching and scientific look into the future. We're reaching more and more out into space. Perhaps we may learn someone, something, somewhere in space is reaching out to us.
Who the visitors are, where they're from, and what they want is unknown.
Bigfoot was attracting national attention and was now rapidly becoming the most intriguing mystery on the North American continent. Scientists and photography experts have examined the individual frames of this film and have come to the conclusion that the film and the creature are authentic.
Telepathy, psychokinesis, Bigfoot and black masses, UFOs and Atlantis, Kirlian photography, cloning, and cryonis. These subjects all have one thing indisputably in common. People want to know more about them. The mankind's future on Earth and beyond.
Welcome to After Dark Radio with your host, Bryan Alvarez.
How's it going, everybody? Bryan Alvarez here on After Dark Radio. January 29, 2017, After Dark Radio, here on the Dark Matter Digital Network every Sunday night. 9 Pacific, midnight Eastern, Dark Matter Digital Network, our weekly double feature with Carl Stern's Dragon King Dark. Got a big show here today. We have been chronicling the monsters, mysteries, ghosts, etc. from all 50 states of the Union. Last week we visited South Dakota. And at the beginning of the show I noted, South Dakota. When you think of South Dakota, you think, how could anything possibly have happened here in South Dakota? What? Are there ghosts? Are there Bigfoot? Is there anything going on in South Dakota? Turned out there was a lot going on in South Dakota. There were tons of reports of everything. Monsters, Bigfoot, ghosts, the whole 9 yards. Well, funny I should have mentioned that last week, as this week we'll be tackling Kansas. And with the exception of The Wizard of Oz, which we're not going to talk about, there's not a whole lot of stuff going on in Kansas. In fact, in terms of Bigfoot, there's virtually nothing to talk about whatsoever. There are a few Bigfoot sightings. There, in fact, was an edition of Finding Bigfoot that was filmed in Kansas. But in general, if you want the real meaty Bigfoot stories, you got to head to Missouri. So we will tackle many of those when we head to Missouri. Now, there are some UFO reports. There's a lot of ghosts, and there are some interesting monster stories as well. That will be the subject of the show here today. Kansas, here on After Dark Radio. I want to mention very quickly, if you want to follow me on Twitter, at Bryan Alvarez is the Twitter handle. The Facebook page for this show is facebook.com/AfterDarkRadioShow. Andrew Ludsky does a fabulous job updating the Facebook page. There's usually 3 or 4 stories that get posted every day, usually 3. Your timeline will not be bombarded. All sorts of great stuff up there. It's free, of course, so if you go to Facebook, just follow the After Dark Radio Show page, facebook.com/AfterDarkRadioShow. Join in on the fun there. Don't forget, if you want more, you can always subscribe to WrestlingObserver.com. That is my main website, covering pro wrestling and mixed martial arts. And Bigfoot, aliens, and UFOs here with After Dark Radio. Virtually every show we've ever done, After Dark Radio-wise, is available on that website. So you can go up into the archives and hear all of the shows that you missed as a subscriber, or you can just have them permanently archived for you. If you ever have to clean off your audio device, got to free up space, fear not, they're all available forever at WrestlingObserver.com. So head up there and subscribe to that. Don't forget, Dragon King Dark with Carl Stern follows this show, and he's got a lot of great episodes lately, doing a lot of stuff about Satan, satanic, backward masking on records, the Church of Satan, the whole 9 yards. If you've missed any of those shows, you've missed out. They're in the archives. at WrestlingObserver.com. And he's got a new show up tonight, as we are here every week doing a big-time double feature. So we're going to do a quick break. Back in just a moment to kick it off. Kansas, monsters, mysteries, ghosts, and more here on After Dark Radio, Dark Matter Digital Network. We are back here on the show. Bryan Alvarez here, After Dark Radio, Dark Matter Digital Network, Sunday nights, 9 Pacific, midnight Eastern. Dark Matter Digital Network. Even though I opened up this show talking about how there are not a lot of Bigfoot sightings in Kansas, I actually am going to kick it off today with 2 articles about Bigfoot. This from the Kansas City. KansasCity.com is the website address. Lisa Gutierrez writes here. What's going on in Missouri? A new map that plots Bigfoot sightings over the last 90 years shows that the legendary alleged man-ape has been spotted 3 times as many times in Missouri than Kansas. When we get to Missouri, we'll talk a lot about Bigfoot. I remember when I was a kid, I would read about the legendary Momo, which was the Missouri monster, which is, I guess, something resembling a Bigfoot, but we can talk about that. Pennsylvania State University doctoral candidate Josh Stevens mapped and graphed every Bigfoot sighting from 1921 to 2012, 3,313 of them. It's compiled by the Bigfoot Field Researchers Association. He mapped and graphed them. Apparently this was part of his doctorate. It's apparently the first time anyone has ever placed the sightings on a map. Every now and then a data set comes along that has to be mapped. This is one of those times, he wrote on his website, joshuastevens.net. According to the map, Sasquatch's favorite haunts in the United States appear to be the Ohio River Valley, Mississippi River Valley, the Sierra Nevada Mountains, Central Florida, and the Pacific Northwest. Right away, you can see that sightings are not evenly distributed, Stephen writes. There are distinct regions where sightings are incredibly common despite a very sparse population. On the other hand, in some of the most densely populated areas, Sasquatch sightings are exceedingly rare. The terrain and habitat likely play a major role in the distribution of reports. Now, this is very interesting because if we presume that there's no such thing as Bigfoot, that everybody is making up stories, that everybody is mistaken a bear or an elk or whatever for Bigfoot. If it's all made up, you should presume that either A, all of the sightings would be evenly distributed, or areas where there is a larger population, there should be more made-up stories than in areas where there is a smaller population. That's not the case here. Now, granted, it does make more sense that you would have more reports in an area where there are elk and bear, for example, than in a place where you're not going to see a lot of that, like the Seattle metropolitan area. But it is interesting that that is the distribution of these sightings. It does list a bunch of BFR reports here as well. Now, speaking of the BFRO, Cliff Barackman, they only call him Cliff on Finding Bigfoot, so I'm sure I butchered his last name. Barackman? Anyway, Cliff has an article on his website about Finding Bigfoot Season 4, an episode they did, The Bigfoot of Oz. And he basically recaps what happened on the show. If you go to iTunes, you can actually grab every season of Finding Bigfoot, which I have done, I might add, and watch them at your convenience. You can find Bigfoot of Oz Season 4 up there. But what I thought was interesting is he talks about the sighting. I'll read some of this, and then I'll talk about what I found interesting about it. He says, Bigfoot in Kansas is rare, but it does happen. Most of the Bigfoot sightings in Kansas are in its southeast corner near the Missouri-Oklahoma border, because, of course, there are a lot of sightings in Missouri and Oklahoma, so if you're near the border, Bigfoot does not... there are border crossings, I guess is the best way to put it. Squatchy border crossings. There are rivers and waterways that branch out from that region into other areas of the state, and these corridors produce the occasional sighting. The evidence that compelled us to visit central Kansas came in the form of a series of photographs taken by a woman named Liz, who lives a few miles northeast of Wichita. One day during the last week of January 2007, Liz went out of her home in the morning to discover numerous footprints in the snow crossing her yard. The previous night had been bitterly cold, minus 30 degrees with the wind chill factor. The area was experiencing the storm of the decade, which dumped as much as 7 inches of snow. Footprints came onto her property from the road, went to a tree in her yard, where the track maker apparently stood and faced the house for a short while. Then it took a right towards a hedge of larger trees before doubling back to the tree and turning right towards the fence. And then talks about this woman, Liz, discovering the footprints and calling the sheriff, etc. Now, what's interesting is that seemed to be the end of the story, Cliff wrote, as he just explains what happens on the show. Or that's where the editors left it. There is more to the story that didn't make the air on the episode. As it turns out, Liz is a custodian at the local intermediate and high school in town. The next workday, she found these same footprints along with a smaller set in the snow at her school. Apparently, the two track makers had raided the dumpster at the school and wandered away. This would have been before the track makers visited her property on the same night. Liz showed the footprints to a friend of hers that lives about a mile away from her property. This friend excitedly told her that she had the same footprints in her yard during the same time period, though it could not be verified that it was the exact same night. It seemed the two track makers were getting around the neighborhood during that cold spell. Now, first off, I find it very interesting that I wonder what has been edited off. You've got a show, and this is not just Finding Bigfoot, this is any of these shows, but you got 42 minutes if you take away commercials. And Finding Bigfoot, for example, they usually do at least 2 night investigations, they talk to witnesses, they do a town hall meeting. So we're talking a lot of footage that has to be edited down to 42 minutes. I often wonder what kind of great stuff is in there that maybe the BFRO folks wished would have stayed on the air, but when you're an editor, you gotta make time. You gotta trim. And apparently a lot of stuff gets trimmed out. Now, this is not Kansas, but a couple of weeks ago we did North Dakota. And on the subject of tracks, I have got to read this from mysteriousuniverse.org. This is a brand new story from just about a month ago, December 25, 2016. A small community in rural North Dakota experienced a very odd visitor this past Christmas. This from mysteriousuniverse.org. Apparently, the holiday cheer in Dickey County attracted a fabled being in the same tier as Santa Claus, Bigfoot. The only difference? Bigfoot may actually be real, and one man has a compelling story to support it. On the evening of December 25th, 2016, an Ellensdale, North Dakota woman witnessed a huge, hairy, ugly monster through her kitchen window. Startled, she called her family friend, Christopher Bauer, an experienced woodsman, to investigate. Bauer arrived on the scene and discovered 18-inch long, 8-inch wide footprints that left deep impressions in the snowy ground. The separation of the prints indicated an amazing 4-foot-long stride. Even more amazing, the trackway spanned an incredible 7 miles through the rural farmland. Bauer followed hundreds of prints leading across a distant highway until they eventually faded up into the nearby hills. The season tracker was, of course, exhilarated by the discovery. It's a Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Gigantopithecus, whatever you want to call him. He's a real animal, he is here, and I want people to know. And unfortunately, you can no longer examine these photographs. He took a couple of photos, or you can't examine the prints, took a couple of photos, but this was December 25. Everything is long since melted. But man, can you imagine if they'd been able to document 7 miles worth of Bigfoot tracks on Christmas night? You would have to be such a determined hoaxer to put on fake feet and trudge through the woods for 7 miles. In the snow, by the way, which more snow is going to fall, snow's going to melt. You got to presume that somebody is going to report something. You'd have to find somebody to dress up as a Bigfoot in order to do the distraction to get people to go find the tracks. That is an amazing amount of hard work and dedication to hoax those, if they were hoaxed. But hey, anything's possible. Back in a moment, monsters. After Dark Radio, Dark Matter, Digital Network. MysteriousUniverse.org, exploring American monsters. Kansas. Notes here, the state of Kansas is known for two things: endless sea of golden wheat fields that stretch across the Great Plains, and it is the starting point for the movie The Wizard of Oz. But there are some stories of monsters, not many, but a few, including the Dog Man. Michael was driving near Lawrence, Kansas in August of 2014 when a deer ran across the road. He slowed the car to a stop to make sure no other deer followed when he noticed something that froze his blood. "I saw red eyes looking in my truck," he reported to the local news, "like eyes shine when a deer looks in a light, but just a dark red." Michael picked up a flashlight from the cab of his vehicle, shone it towards the glowing red eyes. What he saw he could not readily explain. It was something like a dog, he said. The back legs were shorter than the front, and it stood on its hind legs. Animal was about the size of a Great Dane. The creature broke eye contact and walked across the road on two legs. It took the beast 3 steps to cross the pavement. After it crossed, the creature dropped to 4 legs, ran into a field, and it disappeared. Now, why would it walk across the road on 2 legs? I have no idea. Seems if you're going to cross the road, you would want to do it in the quickest way possible. Although, who knows? Maybe dog men are like babies. I've got a new baby who has learned to walk, and even though she used to be able to crawl pretty fast, she walks on 2 legs faster than she does on 4. Maybe it's the same with the Dog Man. In mid-2012, a husband and wife had just driven out of Hudson, Kansas, when they saw what they described as a dragon, according to a website which I am not making up, livepterosaur.com. There was a row of trees alongside the road on the north, the husband said. As we approached the end of the tree row, something huge took to the air. I said, "What the hell is that?" His wife told him it looked like a dragon. This wasn't the only encounter. Sightings of flying reptiles with the wingspan of 15 to 20 feet have been reported in Kansas over the decades. However, what the husband and wife saw that night remains a mystery. And yes, zombies. Although no Kansan not high on bath salts has ever reported a zombie encounter, the state is prepared for that day. In 2014, the Kansas Division of Emergency Management announced October's were Zombie Preparedness Month, the backing of Governor Sam Brownback. If you're equipped to handle the zombie apocalypse, then you're prepared for tornadoes, severe storms, fire, and any other natural disaster that Kansas usually faces. Devin Tucking of the Division of Emergency Management said. So if you want to survive the zombie apocalypse, move to Kansas. MysteriousUniverse.org. Now, this next story, I want you all to Google after you hear this. These are not real monsters, obviously, and it's supposed to be a fun, lighthearted story. I'll read part of it. Kansas park cameras capture monsters, Santa, and more. CBSNews.com. Motion-activated cameras intended to capture images of mountain lions in a Kansas park have instead snapped pictures of pranksters dressed as animals, monsters, and Santa Claus. Police said they found the images on the 2 cameras at the park in Gardner on Monday. Interspersed among images of skunks and coyotes were photos of people wearing costumes pretending to be lions wrestling, a gorilla, various monsters, and an old person with a walker. And, of course, Santa made an appearance during the 3 nights of hijinks. Corporal Robert Huff said it was pretty comical and creative. The pranksters have not come forward. Cameras were established this month to investigate reports of mountain lions. No mountain lions were detected. Now, keep in mind, they're putting out game cameras to look for mountain lions, and a bunch of numbskulls are dressed up in costumes out there, dressed like gorillas, trouncing around to be photographed. They're lucky they weren't eaten by mountain lions. Now, the reason I bring this up and want everybody to Google it is there are several articles about this. Every article includes a different photograph of the pranksters. I gotta tell you, these are the scariest pictures you've ever seen. I almost had a heart attack when I saw these. here's a dude dressed in an ape costume, which of course is black and white. And I guess when you look through a game camera, it sort of does I forget what the term is, but it reverses the contrast or whatever. So the hair's all white and the face is black and it's got this big white grin. This thing is horrifying, this photograph. Every photograph that I've seen of these pranksters is absolutely horrifying. Scariest thing I've talked about on the whole show today. Just want to throw that out there. Kansas park cameras capture Santa. Go check that out. Back in a moment with ghosts here on After Dark Radio, Dark Matter Digital Network. The Shadowlands Haunted Places Index. Man, we're smashing through this show, but what do you expect? We're talking about Kansas. Not a lot of stuff going on here. But you know what? There are a lot of ghosts and haunted areas. So let's get into them here. Shadowlands.net. There is a warning here at the top of every article. Any places listed in the haunted places requires permission to visit or investigate. Many of the places are patrolled by the authorities. Trespassers will be prosecuted. I'll give you some ideas of where you can go, where you won't be prosecuted after this segment ends. Arcadia, the Church of God's Word. When in this church, day or night, you can see shadows of people. Things come on when they are not plugged in, and the lights come on by their self. These are all self-written by the reporters, by the way, so don't yell at me. Atchison at the Globe. The local newspaper's offices are said to be haunted by the ghost of an editor who died under mysterious circumstances. Several people who have been working late at night have been or heard the locked back door open and close by itself. Atchison at Jackson Park. It is said that on the stroke of midnight, the terrifying screams of Molly can be heard. Molly was a beautiful young woman out with her date after prom. The next day, Molly was found dead, hanging by her neck in one of the park trees down in the hollow of the park, her clothes torn. Some believe that her date got too excited and killed her when she refused to go all the way with him. No one will ever know. No one was ever charged with her murder. Beaumont. At the Beaumont Hotel, the spirit of a murdered cowboy walks the top floor halls of this 19th century building. Burlingame. There have been reports for years of a man dressed in black walking the highway, disappearing. Burlington. Child's Play Cemetery. There's no way that there's a place called Child's Play Cemetery in Burlington, Kansas. But that's what they claim. Go wash your vehicle to great cleanliness on the bottoms and windows. Go down this gravel road and stop and check your car. Make note of any prints or anything on your car. Then go into the cemetery, stop, and sit for about 5 minutes. You will probably hear a loud thud on your car. That's when you leave. When you get to the next town, grab a flashlight or whatnot and look at your car. You will have a large handprint on your black glass or back glass and lots of little handprints on your car body. So they're claiming if you go to the Child's Play Cemetery, there are little haunted ghost children that will go and put their ghost hands all over your car. Chanute, C&H Lanes, a woman has died there. She was bowling, and her finger got stuck in the ball, and the ball clobbered her in the head. It is known to be haunted. When you go there, you can hear footsteps and doors in the girls' bathroom shudder. The pins will knock down by themselves, and no one is around. The lights flicker when she's mad. It is located by the Royster Stadium. So you're telling me that this woman was bowling, and she had her fingers in the bowling ball. One finger got stuck, and so when she swung the ball, it didn't release and flew up in the air, landed on her head, and killed her? That's more preposterous than all of these hauntings. Chanute, the Walmart Supercenter. When they changed Walmart to a supercenter, a man who died in 1978 in the parking lot was mad. Now he haunts Walmart. He is known to play in the children's aisle when he is happy, but when he's mad, everything gets cold and the power goes out on Halloween. Stuff gets lost, and only children can see him. Things get out of place. When children follow him, they don't come back. So you tell me there are Children that vanish in this Walmart supercenter? Taken by a ghost? Clay Center, Hawks Landing Creek. It is a creek where people have died. Sometimes you can hear little girls screaming in the distance. You might see or feel this completely black shape-shifter, or you might just get a really bad vibe if you go out there at night. It is terrifying. Hawks Landing Creek. Coffeyville, at the Brown Mansion. There is a turn of the 20th century mansion that has had more than its share of tragedy. Despite his wealth, Mr. Brown lost all of his children, but one in childhood. In the basement, employees tell of hearing bowling balls striking pins where the alley used to be. Wonder if that's the same bowling alley where the woman dropped the ball on her own head. In the third-story ballroom, cherry tobacco smoke can sometimes be smelled in the old smoking room, as well as partygoers being heard. A dashing man in a smoking jacket is sometimes seen upstairs as well. The Elmwood Cemetery in Coffeyville. This is one of the oldest cemeteries in Coffeyville and has many graves over 100 years old, including the graves of the fallen Dalton Gang and the town's defenders from the gun battle of October 5, 1892, that ensued when the Dalton Gang attempted to rob two banks at once in downtown Coffeyville. The cemetery is a favorite dare of the college students in town to visit after midnight. Strange noises, shadows chasing visitors, and creepy feelings are not scarce. Some of these are so well written and some of these are so badly written. That was a good, well-written sentence there. Creepy feelings are not scarce. Cummings at the Chautauqua County Round Mound Cemetery. A witch haunts this old cemetery. The wind does not blow at the cemetery, even though it's on top of a round hill. The place even made the Time magazine years ago as one of the most haunted places on Earth. If you go there late enough, you can hear the dead scream from their graves. Derby Cemetery. You can often read the tombstones, and you'll all of a sudden feel that someone is there. It is unexplainable. 2 words, unexplainable. It is also said apparitions can be seen every once in a while. Diphtheria Hill at the Clay Center. Remind me never to get a house on Diphtheria Hill. An old cemetery on a hill near Clay Center where people with diphtheria were buried alive. You buried them alive? If you go out there and listen real carefully, you can hear babies crying and children playing. A lot of stuff in Dodge City. Fort Dodge still stands and in use as a retirement home for old soldiers. The building there is 150 years old and holds many spirits and is not for the faint of heart. St. Mary's. St. Mary's is an old church no longer used, which is connected to the college. A nun was walking down the first flight of stairs near the doors and had tripped and fallen to her death. From personal experience, the doors usually aren't locked. You can hear the moaning of an old woman at the bottom of the steps. But when you turn the corner, all sounds are ended. Ellis High School. We all know it all happens at the high schools. Lockers slamming. The toilet in the girls' bathroom flushes by itself all of the time, accompanied by chills. Eudora, there is supposed to be a ghost of a woman who killed herself by jumping in front of a train. She did this because her boyfriend was killed in World War II. Fort Riley at Moon Lake. There is a spot around Moon Lake that has a chief's circle. If you camp anywhere near the circle, you start seeing what looks like fireflies that are in 2 sets of 2 and stay low to the ground and don't separate. If you're awake when it happens, they will chase you away from the circle. If you're not awake, you are woke up with hoops and howls, then chased. It is said that the lights are the eyes of braves protecting their chief's circle. Kansas sounds very haunted. Great Bend at Pawnee Rock. It is said that the ghosts of Indians battling can be heard. Also, a few years ago, a man killed his wife's lover there. It is said ghosts remain from this as well. gypsum, the devil's washboard, the Happy Seven. Back in the 50s, 7 high school kids were out raising hell while drinking and driving and drove over 3 treacherous hills that follow in a row, each one getting steeper and steeper. And on the last one, they actually hit the side of it, crushing their car into a very compact box. True story. The town's police had the car put up on a high wooden platform on the side of the road at the exact spot they died to teach the rest of the town teenagers from making the same mistake. Thing is, don't go messing around and even try. Although it's a thrill ride, you will wreck or almost lose it. And it said if you try it, you can hear the young teenagers screaming. This is very dangerous, it says, underlined. Drive with caution. Holcomb, the Holcomb Elementary School. A janitor was cleaning a bathroom when he fell, hit his head, and died. He comes once a year at midnight and rings the school bell. Hutchinson at the Screaming Well. A boy and a girl fell down the well and died. Now at night you can hear their screams, but if you listen up close, a white hand grabs you and pulls you in. And there's a warning here. The well is caving in. Don't get too close. Kansas City, Sour Castle. Now on the historical registry. The story goes that the owner left his wife to go off to war during the Civil War. She received a letter toward the end of the war from him stating that he would arrive on a particular ferry and to wait for him there. She went down to the river to await his arrival. When the last person departed the boat, she was so distraught, thinking that he had died, she went home and hung herself from what is known as the house's bell tower. It is actually just a lookout tower. Her husband had missed the ferry and arrived on the next. When she wasn't there waiting, he went home to find her body. He, then being so grief-stricken, shot himself with his revolver and died next to her. Neighbors have spoken of many noises, laughter, crying, shouting coming from the house, doors opening and closing. They have witnessed strange lights in the bell tower and on the grounds. There, of course, is no trespassing, but you can see the house clearly from the streets on Shawnee Road. Always busy at Halloween, when it has been said that people have seen 2 shapes dancing in the bell tower. And we would be remiss today if we did not give you a couple of places you can go check out without having to worry about being prosecuted for trespassing. This from MysteriousHeartland.com, counting down the 5 most haunted places in Kansas. Number 5, the Hutchinson Public Library. The Hutchinson Public Library, established in 1901, allegedly haunted by a former librarian named Ida Day. In life, Ida Day was famous for her seriousness and stoic demeanor, qualities that followed her beyond the grave. She is mainly spotted in the basement, particularly in the southwest corner, where phantom footsteps, cold spots, and whispers are experienced. In one disturbing encounter described by author Lisa Hefner Heights, a stern old woman confronted the new librarian from the shadows below the stairs. When the librarian replied, the ghost dissolved into the darkness. Not every sighting, however, is as frightening. Number 4, Hamburger Hill in Hutchinson, Kansas. Since at least the 50s, visitors to the Sand Hills north of Hutchinson have been careful not to stray too far from the hiking trails, lest they encounter the deformed figure of Hamburger Man. Maybe this guy should have been in the monster section we did today. Half ghost, half monster, the Hamburger Man has stalked his way through local legends for several generations. It is said that he kidnaps his victims and drags them to his ramshackle shack deep within Sand Hills State Park. His weapon of choice is either a large curved knife or a hook. He grinds his victims into hamburger meat. There is some disagreement regarding his physical existence. Some say he is a ghost. Others, he is an actual living hermit who was horribly disfigured in a fire. Podwin Place, number 3, Topeka, Kansas. Picturesque Victorian home in Topeka's historic Podwin Place district has been haunted since 1972 when the owners began renovations. The paranormal event started with a strange slapping or ringing sound on the wooden floors. Both Dorothy Gardner and her sister reported hearing heavy breathing and felt something pushing down their mattresses at night. Once while hanging new wallpaper in the west bedroom, Dorothy heard a man's voice say, "You're doing a nice job." Items also went missing, and then randomly reappeared without explanation. Number 2, Kansas State University. One of the oldest universities in Kansas. Though its students are focused on the sciences, behind closed doors they whisper about several ghostly happenings around campus. The Purple Mask Theater, believed to be haunted by the ghost of a Wildcat football player named Nick, who was fatally injured during a game. According to Tom Ogden, the author of Haunted Colleges and Universities, his footsteps have been heard throughout the theater. He is known to cause all kinds of mischief, including rearranging chairs, playing loud music at night, setting off fire extinguishers, and spilling paint. And number 1 in the Haunted Places Registry. Perhaps you have heard of Stoll, Kansas, and the Stoll Cemetery. A crumbling stone church and a lonely cemetery outside this tiny rural community are the focus of a terrifying legend. It is said that witches and occult groups use the old church for their dark rituals. A gnarled pine tree formerly stood in the cemetery until it was struck by lightning and cut down. The tree was allegedly used to hang witches in the 1800s. Stoll reportedly has a strange history. Near a long-forgotten trail named Devil's Road, a man accidentally set fire to his own son, killing him. Another man was found hanged from a tree by the side of the road. The main story, however, concerns a flight of stone stairs hidden in the woods near the church. According to legend, the entrance to the stairs opens up on Halloween and the spring equinox. Anyone unfortunate enough to locate and descend the stairs will find a gateway to hell at the bottom. This sounds like the 13 steps to hell that we have around here in the Maltby Cemetery, allegedly. According to one bizarre report, the devil reportedly makes a personal appearance at the cemetery on Halloween at midnight to visit the grave of a witch with whom the devil had a child. The child is said to materialize in the surrounding woods, taking on the form of a werewolf. Stoll, Kansas, which, by the way, is a great name. MysteriousHeartland.com if you'd like to know more. And that is it for today, everybody. I want to thank you very much for listening. We're going to wrap it up here. Don't forget, we're here every Sunday, 9 Pacific, midnight Eastern on the Dark Matter Digital Network. Carl Stern's coming up next with a brand new Carl Stern Dragon King Dark. I want to thank you all for listening. Follow me on Twitter at Bryan Alvarez, Facebook.com/AfterDark Radio Show, as well as WrestlingObserver.com for full archives. I want to thank everybody. Keith Rowland, the folks at the Dark Matter Digital Network. Check them out as well. DarkMatterDigitalNetwork.com. And that is it from here. We'll talk to you again next time. After Dark Radio here on the Dark Matter Digital Network.